Okay, welcome back. Our card got full there, sorry we got cut off there, but we're just talking about the fertility of the eggs. And the fertility of the eggs goes up the fresher the sperm. So even though we know that girls can go for a year with sperm in them and then reproduce, it is much better to have fresh sperm in there. So we're right at that critical point where we want to put in our very best strong males going into the final locks and making sure that they get the very best they can. So Jad, we've done 2 pairings, is it?
Yeah,
now the camera's
that's
still
3 pairings.
3 pairings. The camera, if you can see quickly here, the camera's still in situ. Okay, can you see any activity going on there, Jared, yourself?
Not yet.
No, but they're keeping them away from the camera, which is great. I'm hoping we get some nice footage.
So the last one's a cinnamon pie.
Cinnamon pie, Elvis.
And he's going to Ray, our yellow belly pie.
Now what are we producing here, Jared?
Cinnamon yellow belly pies.
Yeah. So there's a chance for some pumpkin pies, and there's a chance for some lovely animals here. And he's doing really well. He's still in the eating, so he's nice and solid. I've just got to...
And I think it's good to say that a lot of these babies that we produce will be on Morph Market for sale.
Yeah, because we are building up quite a nice collection of pumpkin pies, so
hopefully they will do the job.
The idea is that we'll sell those to help pay for the hobby. So you've got to... That leads me to a really important point here, Jared, is that when you're doing your breeding rotations, as much as you want to go for your double hets and your triple hets, you've also got to remember that you've got to generate sufficient snakes that you can sell to pay for their food and for their well-being. And even though you're going for a long-term project, you have to also balance it between what's marketable and what's highly desirable. Now, some people love double hets and triple hets, don't get me wrong, but we're finding it's easier to sell the visuals for £300 or £400 than it is to sell the double hets. But let me know your views on that, guys. But I do think that's a balance. When you make a decision on what your pairing is, you've got to not only pair for what you want, you've got to pair for what you think the market wants to generate the income for you, to allow you to feed this many animals. So it's a very fine balance between doing your hobby and also dealing with the financial side and making sure there's sufficient income to pay for everything. So they're looking really good, Jad, really happy. And we've prepared everything for them, so you'll see all the humidity levels are right. She's very, very big, Jad. She's been eating like a trooper.
Yeah.
So let's hope that they lock and do the business. So we'll leave them in peace. And the fact is, we've got 2 breeding together will stimulate one another. So all the hormones.
And then one just below, and then one just above.
So you've got them all close together, haven't you? So all the hormones.
2, 3, 4.
And now that leads me on to another point on Richard's video yesterday. Thank you, Richard. That's a lovely video on the 1,000 gram wool. And Joey, a friend of his called Joe Tully, I think it was. Lovely bloke, really good thing. I wanted to discuss, let's have a little discussion about our take on the 1,000 gram wool, because I don't know if you saw the video, Jared, but I can give you a quick summary. So I think what Rich was saying is a lot of us are experiencing the girls coming up between 800 and 1,200 grams. A lot of them are stopping, not eating for some reason. They're going on a fast. And I think Richard invited Joe over to his channel to explain his take on that. And Joe had a really interesting idea, which was he thinks that the females are fasting because they're preparing for next year. They're seeing how long they're testing their own bodies to see whether they can sustain a fast. Because when the girls get to the point where they're about to build their follicles, they will go off food partway through the follicle build, and they could go off food for as much as 3 months, Jad, couldn't they? Quite easily, even more. And if you have a natural incubation, they'll go for another 2 months on top of that. So if you choose not to incubate outside of the rub and you let the female incubate, a female might have to go 5 months in the wild without food.
Yeah, maternal incubation.
Maternal incubation. So his thoughts were, he thinks that possibly one idea he came up with was that the young girls that are coming up ready for the following season almost do a dress rehearsal of what they're going to go through. It's like anything in life. When you're going to play golf or football, you train before you play. So this could be their training period. What's your thoughts on that, Jared?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It
makes complete sense. I think Richard said it made sense. Now, I'm got my own ideas on this. I've not experienced myself any of my females going through the 100. This idea of a 1,000 gram wool is virtually non-existent in my life. I've not experienced it on anything I've bought. Jared's had it, what, 3 years ago. Which one did you have a problem with, Jared?
Coop.
Coop, is that your spider that you're not breeding with? How long did she?
Spider.
Enchi spider. So how long did she go off food for?
About 2 months. She didn't want any food. She was just under 1,000 grams.
Just under 1,000. She went off for 2 months. And what do you think caused that yourself?
No idea.
No idea. Now she has since then put on weight, and what does she weigh now?
I reckon she's getting about 1800.
1800. So they do recover from that fast. They can go a long time without food, so there's nothing to worry about. But since then, we've got now 120 animals, and we've got 10 what I call fledgling girls coming through that are between 1,000 and 1,200 grams at the moment. And every single one of them are eating. I don't think of one that's not eating. So that kind of begs the question, is the 1,000 gram wool our own conception of what we think is happening? Is it really a wool? And I think Richard was saying we shouldn't look at it as a wool, we look at it as a preparation time, and I like that concept. We describe it as a wool, but it isn't a wool. In our head, it's a wool for us, on our ambitions and our plans. We see it as a wool because we're keen to breed with those females, and we just worry that they're not going to get up to size, have to wait another year. And that's part of life. We have to be patient in this particular hobby. But I've never experienced it, and I think what made me think about this issue is that, is it to do with other things? Is it to do with, I'm going to draw upon Rob at Royal Bulls. He mentioned about the rhythm of the room. Now I started off with a lot of animals. Jared started off with 1 or 2, and most of us do. But I went straight in at the deep end, Jared, because I saw how much success you were having. And I think in the first year I had 60 animals in my first year, didn't I, Jared? So I've had in my bedroom 60 animals that I've been caring for and learning the skill of and the artistry of doing this. Then we had 10 lockups in my first season. 10 girls that gave us eggs, gave us babies. So we ended up with quite a few babies last year, and most of them came out of my bedroom. And it's interesting that your smaller collection, the 2 of the girls that you wanted to go didn't go.
I only bred one of them.
Oh, you only bred one of them, but the one that you bred didn't go.
No.
Now, I think that reinforces what Rob's saying, is that the more you have breeding together, the hormones permeate the room. It's a bit like feeding your snakes. If you have a rat smell permeating in the room, then they're more likely to strike and feed better because they've had an hour or 2 to get their appetite going. The biggest mistake people make on feeding is they think they can go in, heat up a rat, go feed it, and they wonder why it doesn't want to eat.
I think also I didn't really have ambient temperature.
No.
I didn't really have that when I started off.
So I think getting your ambient temperature is correct. So all I would say to you before we go anywhere, I think we need to do more research on this. And my idea would be to have 100 of us record any issues that we have with our fledgling girls coming up, any of our progressive girls, and record what their behaviour is, how long they go off the food, why they, when they went off with food, what weight were they, when did they go back on. And then you've got to measure your ambient temperature, you've got to check the humidity levels in your rubs, and you've also got to check your temperatures. And you record on a daily basis all of that data on, say, 1 or 2 snakes, and then we feed that into a statistical model and plug in the data and actually see any correlations or anything going on. And I believe, this is my own opinion, is I believe that you don't have to go through that wall if you choose not to, as a breeder. And the reason I say that is because I've not experienced it. And I think it's because I've got so many animals that are giving off those hormones that I think it eggs on the girls coming up. So when the big girls are hooking up and locking, the girls are thinking the next step for them would be naturally to want to join their older female counterparts. But if you haven't got a lot of hormones floating around, maybe they do get lazy and switch off and think, I'll wait another year. So I'm thinking whether it's hormone driven and whether it's the rhythm of the room. Now, Rob's counsel to us was better to put 5 pairs together in one day than to stagger them every day, because one very virile male will stimulate all the other boys to start to breed, because the other boys will think, if I don't get my sperm into this girl, the big clown boy might end up spawning with 5 other girls. So they get into their protective mode. And I guess it's a bit like humans, really. When 2 men fall in love with the same woman, the way that man has to win over the woman steps up another level, doesn't it? You want to impress. You want to dine and wine and treat them nicely, and you want to always bring your best out. But if you didn't have any competition and you thought, finding a partner was easy, you wouldn't be as sharp, as focused as you would be. So it's all about survival of the fittest in a way. So that's my take on it. I think there's other things to consider as well, Jared. So the other things I considered was the location, the climate. So it might vary. That's why we want to do a statistical sample on 100 people around the world. So we get someone that's living in a cold environment, someone living in a warm environment. And then we do the size of the collection. We work out the size of your collection to see if there's a correlation between small collections might have the problem and big collections may not. And then we can find that from the data. The rhythm of the room, how you breed is very important. The diet, what are you feeding your animals, how often, what size, what are they getting in terms of nutrition. Husbandry, how good is your husbandry, are you on point? You know, if we can eliminate all these other factors and make sure that everything is on point, and let's say we do this and we all adjust ourselves and we find a winning formula that this wool is man-made rather than animal-made, then I think we just can push that out and say that's a myth. This 1,000 gram wool is a myth. It's all down to us, or the way, or the approach we take. And then the other thing, of course, is that I think it's really wise to listen to people that have been around. I'm a baby, 18 months in the hobby, but I would listen to someone like Rob, who's had many years of experience at Royal Bulls, and get his take. So maybe, Rob, I'm going to invite you to send us your take, please, on the 1,000 gram wool, as to whether you think it's a man-made concept or whether you think it is actually a reality that these animals do go there no matter what the conditions, whether it's genetic or whether it's just part of their makeup. I think in the wild, I don't know whether anyone's ever studied any girls, but I understand that in the wild they have found a 1,000 gram female on a clutch of eggs, which you might find hard to believe. Mind you, they can lose that much weight, I suppose, so it may be that when they bred they may have been 1,800 and lost 800 grams. But what I'm saying to you is that I believe there's evidence that some females do breed in the wild. They don't wait to jump on the scales and say I'm 1,500 grams and therefore I'm going to go. They go when they want to go.
When they're mature enough.
When they're mature enough. So I think that we tend to bring in these barriers of 1,500 grams because they're safe barriers for us. We feel safer hitting those targets. In reality, the girls will probably go less than that, and I wouldn't recommend going less than 1,500 myself. We certainly don't. But you take someone like Miguel, who's new on the scene, 4 years, he gets a lot of criticism from other breeders for breeding at 1,200 grams. Yet, the success he's having and the welfare of his animals are fine. I mean, he actually sells a lot of those gills on after they're bred because they recondition very quickly. They put on weight when they're bred, and he goes for it. Now, whether you believe that's the right approach or not, obviously personal opinion, but he's actually kind of breaking that mindset by actually showing us that it can be done safely. So, you know, I'm very open. I don't want to be too rigid with my views. I'm new coming into this, so I want to be able to do best practice, but I also want to be open-minded enough to see, is there another way or a better way of doing things? So that's almost the end of the first part. I wanted to also take this opportunity just to send our love to all the families who have been impacted by the loss of their loved ones during this pandemic. And you'll know that yesterday's news was that in the UK, 100,162 lives have been lost in 10 months in the UK. Now, I'm going to show you a little video clip of Newsnight last night where I thought it was good analysis and good reporting, just to highlight a couple of issues that I wanted to raise today in memory of that. But I think also I would like to light a candle to remember the loss of those loved ones. As we contemplate that, I'm just hoping that this will work. We'll come back to the candle, but Jared, I'd like you to just video this news report because I think there's some really interesting statistics here.
We can get this down to numbers 20,000 and below. That's a good outcome in terms of where we would hope to get to with this outbreak, but I mean, it's still horrible.
For so many, it's felt like time stopped in March 2020, like our lives were put on hold. But for more than 100,000 of our fellow citizens, our mums, dads, grandparents, uncles, aunts and siblings, their fate was far worse. $100,162 people have died within 28 days of a COVID test. That's roughly 1 in 660 British people. That's the capacity of Wembley Stadium, and then some more. It's roughly 128 Airbuses at full capacity, 114 Eurostar trains, the population of Carlisle or Exeter or Derry, more than all the casualties of every war the United Kingdom has fought since 1945. 14 times more. And remember, this is likely a conservative estimate. Excess death figures are best to fully capture the effects of the pandemic, and they have been increasing again. Since 2020, they're running at 110,100 higher, 15% higher than the norm. And though it is a little difficult to compare, the UK is at the very top of the table in terms of international deaths, with 1,400 COVID deaths per million. Behind every single one of these, someone who meant something to someone else.
I'd say it was quite traumatic to see someone so healthy and vivacious go from living a full life to being gone in the space of 2 or 3 weeks. And I would say that a very big part of who I am was because of my dad. And I've never felt so lost before.
Unlike the last great pandemic of 1918, this has been a plague primarily on our old, not young. Its victims, those enjoying their later years, their years of rest, to enjoy their families, and they them. Because 78% of all deaths have been those aged 80 or over. The biggest single group of deaths have been those aged 90 or over. But this isn't the whole story, because you're also more likely to be an ethnic minority if you died from this disease, more likely to be poor, and more likely to have to go out and work for your living, unable to sit at home working from your laptop. This list of 100,000 people is dominated by the old and all too often the working class. People who work in factories, more likely to die than those who work in offices. People who are in caring professions, 3 times more likely to die than those who are in the professional classes. Indeed, it is all too credible that if you lost your life from this disease and you are young, you were trying to prevent someone else from losing theirs. This January is about to surpass April as the deadliest month, with nearly 24,000 deaths and 5 days still to go. Indeed, this winter has been even deadlier than the spring. And whatever the month, it has been care homes, which have been one of the most tragic theatres of this virological war. Over the sweep of the year, that figure didn't stop climbing. Indeed, as of this week, we now know that nearly 23,000 people have died in care homes from COVID-19 in England and Wales alone. That's about 1 in 14 of the entire care home population. A minister once famously said that a protective ring had been placed around our care homes. The figures tell a different story. One of the sadder things about today is that it isn't even an ending. The drumbeat will get longer and louder still. The Prime Minister said the government had done all it could. The thing that must haunt us is whether that's right, or whether different choices at different times might have meant that the daily rhythm had been all the quieter, and the pain of those of us left behind all the lesser.
News Guru, we asked the government to discuss this, but they declined. We're joined by Joe Goodman, the co-founder of the campaign group COVID-19 Bereavement.
There are some sobering statistics there, Jared. Have you seen that before?
No.
I saw that last night. It really I thought it was a very good report. It gives us the statistics, and it will lead us on to this afternoon's filming, because we're going to be talking about mind control as one of the Jedi forces. And I think the government, unfortunately, they do use media to try to cover up their own response to this pandemic. And I'm going to discuss some of the issues that have hit. Why is the UK one of the most developed international countries or kingdoms in the whole of the world? Got the highest there, Jared. That's well over 100,000, 5 times more than what the politicians were hoping for at the early stages. Something that's desperately gone wrong, and we need to face the music and face up to this. And I believe part of it is that we are lagging behind as a government, are always responding to the problem rather than putting the 6 Ps in place. And I think it's not just because of this year, but it's basically the last 25 years the NHS has been underfunded, overstretched, under-resourced, and that hasn't helped at all. And if anything good comes out of this crisis, is that we invest more money in our staff, nurses, and the doctors, in the buildings, the facilities. We need to really take this seriously, because this pandemic is teaching us who we really are as a society and how we care for people. And we've been exposed as a society in terms of lack of preparation. So we must learn from this. Now obviously we're still in the middle of it and it's worrying for us all. But we can learn from the past and we can make adjustments, and we need to encourage our leaders to take earlier action, be decisive, be good leaders, to protect lives and not take things seriously, and not to put economics over people's lives. There is a fine balance there because people need money to pay for food, and I understand that. But I think we need to make sure that we get that balance right, and I don't think we have personally. There are also other reasons why the UK is the top of the board as far as deaths are concerned, and it's because we're a multinational United Kingdom. We have people from the Commonwealth all over the world that come in and out of the UK, and with that comes higher spread of contagious viruses. And also we're a very sociable, interacting society. We do mix with each other a lot, pubs and all the rest of it. And I'm not blaming the pubs for this, but I'm saying is that we are a very sociable group of people. So I think that doesn't help. We also have a lot of poor and needy people in this country who are having to go to work and expose themselves to the virus, whereas most professionals can work from home and protect themselves. So you'll notice on that video that besides the elderly, you're finding care workers are 3 times more likely to lose their lives caring for us. They're putting their lives on the line. So our love and our concern goes out to all the care workers, and it was an appalling statistic that 1 out of 4 people in UK care, 1 out of 14 people in care homes have lost their life since the pandemic, and one of them was one of my clients that had to go into a care home, and I got a phone call from her son just a week or so ago, and he was absolutely devastated that he can't spend time with his mother. And there's a real issue there, because besides the deaths, there's all the emotional pain wrapped up. Students are going and getting food banks at the moment. They can't afford. I mean, most students work parallel to studying at university, and there's no jobs for them because all the bars are shut, the restaurants are closed, and students are literally going to food banks to get food to keep them fed. That's the reality. The government need to do something about it. Besides the loss of their education, they're also actually fighting for the food on the table. We've got 1.72 million unemployed at the moment. And do you know how many people are on furlough, Jared? 10 million. Now, if the government didn't bring in that furlough scheme, the unemployment could be as high as 10 million plus, which represents 1/3 of our working population. That would be worse than the Great Depression in the 1930s. So we've got to do everything we can, all of us, to do our little part in protecting lives and protecting our families, so that we can have a strong economy and that we can get some form of normality back into our lives. We need to protect our economy as well. There are also another side effect of this, Jared, is did you know that there are, how many people would you guess are waiting to have operations at the moment?
No idea.
5 million, including myself. I need a hip adjustment, and I've waited nearly 2 years for this, and I've not gone forward because I wanted to give less pressure on the NHS. But I will need fixing at some point, but I'm going to be in a huge waiting list. There's 5 million people waiting with much more urgent surgery, cancer. You've got people with heart attacks suffering with cancer. You've got people that have got so many issues out there. You've got people that suffer with strokes. And so the actual deaths are a lot higher than even the COVID deaths. And when we have a full review of this, you're going to see the magnitude of this issue. So getting the leadership right, and us working collectively as a community, that we do listen and take this seriously and not think that we're not exposed. We could be a carrier and adding to this problem. So we all need to take responsibility here. We talked about the mental health issues, but suicides are through the roof at the moment, and people that are attempting suicides is also up. People are not happy. They're in a really bad state. They've been isolated, they're lonely. And they think take their lives is the only way out. And people can't go and care for them because they're being restricted on access. There's a lot of anxiety out there as well. The anxiety of loneliness is causing many issues. And this is the reason why this channel is more about snakes. Much more than snakes. It's about people and real families. So please be patient with us. If we decide to do this extra bit of attention to detail outside of the snakes, we will give you plenty of snake things to think about, but we want to get a message across in our own community how important this is. Much more important than anything else. So I think that's about it for today, Jad. Just to give everyone an indication of what we're doing this afternoon on part 2, which will be a little bit more light and fun. Obviously, I think today's the day that we do remember those 100,000 plus that have passed. But in part 2, we're going to meet a Jedi Knight who's going to give us some training, and he's going to be training us on mind control and the pros and cons of that. And also we're going to be learning about how to help our animals with respecting their freedom to choose. And I'm going to bring in another concept as well, where we can look at the power of the forces. There's 2 forces that we're going to look at this afternoon. One of them is to do with the power of the mind, and not letting others influence us negatively, but making sure that people don't manipulate us, which kind of ties in with the governments and the politicians that manipulate us all the time. How we can discern and know whether they're telling the truth, and how we can read things correctly. But doing the same with our snakes, being able to know what the snakes really do need, and how we can overcome these obstacles that we perceive. So that's going to be an interesting one to discuss. And then the other thing we're going to discuss is we're going to discuss the power of the Force, which is called lightning force, which is predominantly on the dark side. Most of the, if you like, baddies in the dark side of the Force, they use this lightning power that comes out of their fingers to attack people. But you'll notice that the Master Jedi, which is Yoda, he doesn't actually do that himself, but he deflects it, absorbs it, and fires it back at them. And being a martial artist myself, and I've got a blue belt in judo, I've been trained as a young child to turn negative energy into positive energy. So when someone comes at me, I allow them to come at me. In fact, the faster they come at me, the better, because I've learnt how to convert that energy into my advantage. And so anyone out there that is having a pop at our channel, I'm just going to give you a little warning that anything that you fire at us which I feel uncomfortable with, I will absorb that power, and I will allow that to enhance the quality of the viewing. I will love you irrespective of your attacks, and I will give you a warning if it gets too bad, and I will give you a red ticket if it gets to the point where you need to leave. And the whole 99.5% of our viewers are loving it. The last video we put out, we got our best views in 12 hours. We had 30 views an hour. For a channel that's only got 390 subscribers, we've got 360 views on that video in less than a day, Jared, which is almost 100% of our subscriber base. Now, Chris Pye reckoned that we're going the wrong way, and he is disgusted with what we're doing, and he's not happy with it. And you can take a hike, Chris. If you're not happy, go. But I want you to stay because you can contribute. I want you to change your mindset and know the reality of what's out there and what we're doing. And there's another one called the Sith Lord, which is quite an appropriate name. Both of them feel like they're on the dark side of this particular hobby. I hope they're not. I hope they are good men, honourable men that have honour. And they can become men of honour if they're not. It's your call, your decision. The principles that we teach here, and that Yoda teaches, is to make us realise when we're moving towards the dark side. We do it without realising it. Because there's good and bad in all of us, light and darkness. And the key is to have the light prevail over the darkness. So we've got some really exciting things to discuss this afternoon. Stay with us. Jared and I have almost finished all our tax returns. So when we finish next month, you're going to get more love, more love. And thank you for viewing, and we shall see you this afternoon.